So, do you find any link between announced cutting off financing the war or in Ukrainian side by United States and European Union?
What are you going to get? It's Ukraine has lost. To me, Ukraine lost when it started. But I think people are beginning to see now. And to be honest with you, everybody knows Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe.
The world is going to World War III. Do you think we are?
I don't think so. I think the problems at the moment is diplomacy is dead.
Yes.
And whereas how many years ago it seemed that war was the last option, these days it's become the first option. And then if people are not complying, then they'll get aggressive. But there's that many ways to target people these days. Even if we go back to Ukraine, there's been multiple cases of people dying from poisoning in Ukraine. Poisons are very easy to get hold of, and they're very easy to administer. I'll put it this way: I talked about this with people all the time. How could Hamas accumulate all the weaponry they have, all the logistics they have, build all the tunnels they have, if Israelis had any intelligence gathering operations within Gaza?
Dear all, welcome back to Peacemaker by Adnan Habul. I'm your host, and I'm bringing an interesting guest, Mr. Orlando Andy Wilson, a private investigator, security consultant, and writer who has worked internationally at all levels of specialist security and investigation industry for over 30 years. Welcome to my podcast, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Please tell us something briefly about yourself for the audience, about something in your words.
I've been involved now over 35 years in security, investigations, business, etc. I started many years ago in '88 when I joined the British Army. I was in the British Army for 5 years. I then went into private security. I worked in London, I worked in the US, I've worked in Africa, Latin America, Europe, little bits of the Middle East. These days I write. I got an array of books up. I split that generally between my time these days is writing. We provide training courses and also mainly consultancy services, investigation services, and we manage some close protection services.
That's good. You also have a website, Truth Only Has a Few Friends. Can you tell me something about that?
That's my private blog, my private site, away from the Risk Incorporated site. And I get to talk more freely there. So I write various articles on various things, be it some current affairs, some of my perspectives on life, people, business, and that type of thing. It gives me more freedom to write, whereas the Risk Incorporated, we try to keep that strictly towards security, close protection, and that type of thing.
Well, as a program manager of international NGO, I was very interested in your article about NGOs. You have quite interesting and unconventional view of the NGOs. So I like
Am I wrong?
I like to hear unconventional views. So can you tell us something more about NGOs?
Okay. To me, NGOs are double-sided. I know some very good people working for NGOs. And the good people I know are generally the people that's in the field, doing the work, dealing with the problems. Um, but there again, you have the business side of the NGOs, which to me is very corrupt and very dirty. I first seen this in Haiti. I was working in. I spent quite a bit of time in Haiti, and you used to see. I think I mentioned in the articles, most of the NGOs, most of the United Nations people were around the swimming pool at the Montana Hotel. They used to go into Port-au-Prince when they had to, and back up around the Montana. So they're in Pittenville in the nice areas. They're not going out and how can we say getting their boots dirty. I've dealt with numerous NGOs over the years, and again, they all seem to fly business class. They all seem to live very, very well. So it gets me, where does a lot of their money go that should be going towards um, helping people? And some of the people I deal with, some of the Somalis I deal with, come back to me recently and they were after NGO work. They said, we're not dealing with the NGOs, it's haram, it's dirty. Because too much of the money is going in people's pockets. They're not helping anybody.
So
So this
whose
is where I
fault is
think the
it?
NGO world is there's positives, but there's also a lot of negatives.
Yeah, what do you think? Whose fault is it?
It's business, it's people. And again, I'm a little bit cynical towards people. People want to make money. And again, once people see a lot of money, chances are a lot of people will put that money in their pocket.
Yeah.
Where I am now, I'm not going to say where I am now, but where I am now, years ago, we were dealing with people here with NGOs and they're making big money. I met some lady that was one of the best fundraisers for NGOs, and she lives a very lavish lifestyle, very lavish offices. And I don't think she's ever got her boots dirty, but she's fundraising for NGOs.
Well, I can tell you my NGO stopped trafficking of people, maybe
Mm-hmm.
because of the topic. It's not quite
Mm-hmm.
popular among donors, you know. Uh, a lot of people that we approached, of course, in words, in their
Mm-hmm.
narrative, they are supporting fighting against trafficking of people. But when it comes to donating money, they start their stories uh, about inflation, about economic crisis,
Mm-hmm.
which is true, yeah. But we also notice that certain NGOs are poor with money. They are they are doing quite well. But
It's
nevertheless,
I
maybe,
I think that people trafficking, a lot of people claim to want to help, but a lot of people turn a blind eye to it because it's very complicated.
yeah,
And if you're trying to solve the problem, I think there's a lot of corruption involved in the people trafficking.
yes, it's a
Because if you're
huge
looking
business.
internationally, there's a lot of law enforcement involved in people trafficking.
Exactly, exactly.
So it's complicated.
Our roots of NGO started back in 2000 in United Nations here in
Mhm.
Balkans, and when we reached some high level, uh, let's say, people involved, you know, uh, the program was shut down, and that's why we decided to establish international NGO, and we are persistently fighting, but you know, the issue about funding is main issue.
I think in a lot of things, and this comes into the security world in general, we're seeing it now with the conflicts we mentioned earlier. People don't want the conflicts to end. They don't want the problem to end because there's so many people making money from it. We had some bad press years ago in Haiti because some of the people we trained there, one of the municipal police forces, were accused of ripping down a refugee camp in Port-au-Prince. which they did. And the reason they did, because three policemen was killed near the airport, and the people that killed the policemen ran and hid in the tents of this refugee area during night, and nobody could go in there and find them. It's too dangerous. So the next day, the mayor of Dalmar's office sent the city we used to work with, sent people to inspect the tent camp, the tented camp, and there was like one family living there, which they relocated. Everything else was empty. But what was happening, people were turning up during the day to hang around that camp because they knew people would come up to give them aid. So it was, how can we put it? The problem could have been solved. Everybody was housed, but because people were upset, the NGOs were upset that camp was torn down because it gave them a photo shoot to come and give food to people or give aid to people, which could have been how, well, the people were housed in other places anyway. They were just getting free handouts. So I think in some ways, a lot of the NGOs can keep the problem going longer than they need to be kept going because it's profitable for them. It makes money for them. And that was a lot of money disappeared in Haiti, especially after the earthquake. I think the Red Cross spent what's million. I think they spent 6 million to build 6 houses or something stupid, and nobody knows where the money went. It disappeared. So there's a lot of corruption within the international NGOs, and I think that's a major problem.
Yeah. Well, our founder, Miss Celia de la Varenne, she was threatened to be killed by local gangs involved in trafficking in Haiti, and
Yeah.
she had to be evacuated immediately because nobody could guarantee her safety. So this is how close we were, you know. But
Haiti's an interesting place. It's sad. It's gone out of control at the moment, but Haiti's Haiti. That's it. That's all you can say.
yeah. Uh, from NGO field, let's go to GO, to government. You mentioned a few seconds ago that nobody has interest, I will paraphrase, nobody has interest to end the conflict, you know, and to finance that. So do you find any link between announced cutting off financing the war or in Ukrainian side by United States and European Union? Is it just to make another frozen conflict or something greater or simply lack of money or what?
I think people are beginning to see there's no good end result for their investment. There's no return on the investment. What are you going to get? It's Ukraine is lost. To me, Ukraine lost when it started. But I think people are beginning to see now. And to be honest with you, everybody knows Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe. And everybody's poured money into it and money's disappeared. So when it comes down to the rebuilding of Ukraine, okay, if you're doing a risk assessment on where's the money going to be going that's put into Ukraine for construction, reconstruction, how much of that is going to be going to need to go to for bribes and everything else to get anything done? How much of that is going to disappear?
Well, we haven't reached that stage yet about reconstruction of Ukraine. I have spent 7 years from
Mm-hmm.
2014 to 2021 in Ukraine, and only a few months before this full scale of invasion, I ended my mission in Ukraine because I was limited by contract up to 7 years. I stayed 7 years and two
Mm-hmm.
months. And well, a lot of people in the West, from those countries who are sending money like sending money for defense of Ukraine. Actually, a lot of people are not aware that not so much cash comes to Ukraine. It comes as a military hardware, weapons, ammunition,
Mm-hmm.
mostly outdated version, which needed expensive destruction, and it was, very convenient to send it somewhere where the war is going on and where whatever piece of weapon is more than welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, there is some return of investment, and also in Western Europe, they are reopening, and in United States as well, uh, some factories are reopened for production of new military hardware, and it's job openings. So economies of those countries are not suffering that much. What do you think about that?
I was in the United States about 6 weeks ago. It's my first time back in 3 years. And I'm telling people the US looked very shabby. I was in South Florida, and that used to be a pretty vibrant area. Now, the coffee shops, trying to get a coffee after 10 o'clock at night is difficult. Everywhere is worn. People seem very depressed about jobs, etc. They're losing money and a lot of things. And I think you're beginning to see now that the Republicans have taken, I get this wrong, I think the Republicans have taken the Congress. They're saying that, or the Senate, I get those mixed up. So I'm sure somebody will correct me. But now the Republicans are beginning to get the other hand. It's back down to, why are they funding a war in Ukraine? America has enough problems. America has enough problems of its own. Why are they funding a war that's got nothing to do with that?
But
Other people are
okay,
making money. Go ahead.
I can understand that argument why they would uh, finance a war far away, but why they are so eager to finance Israel in the war against Palestinians?
It's the same. I'm sure a lot of people again calling this out. Why is the US getting involved in this? Why are they going around the world getting involved in problems that's not their problems? And this is where, even though a lot of people didn't like him, at least with Trump, he was pulling people back. He was pulling the US back. But again, you got the Biden administration. And again, the same as what happened with the Obama administration and the Arab Springs, they caused a lot of problems because they're making a lot of money for their friends, to put it bluntly. And I think this is where, hopefully, and a lot of people won't like me for saying this, hopefully Trump will get in again and things can get back to normal. So I think as long as you see the people like the Biden administration being in power, you're going to have more and more endless conflicts because people are making money from it. Ukraine, the Bidens were into Ukraine to start with. I'm sure you've seen all the mess with Hunter Biden and his corruption in Ukraine. Okay, it's money, it's kickbacks. There's money in it for a few people. And again, if you looked at this, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier before I jumped on here, if anybody thought that Ukraine could win a war against Russia, they're stupid. Because Russia has vast resources. They have the people, they can click their fingers and all the car factories will be turned over to making weapons. They have a lot of friends in the world. So anybody thought that this was a war for the right reasons, we're dreaming. They're brainwashed by social media. And because of this, to me, it's like, there's no other reason but corruption. People wanting to make money. What do they reckon? half a million Ukrainians have died, 400,000. They've destroyed the country. So I think this, if nothing else, in time, history will look at this. It's a war for the completely wrong reasons. And if you're looking at it from an ethical point of view, even we can talk about Gaza if you want after this, but people were calling for ceasefires in Gaza from the start. Nobody was calling for any ceasefires in Ukraine. All you've heard about Ukraine is send more weapons, send more money, send more weapons, send more money. Nobody's interested in peace. Why?
Well, I have my opinion. For instance, the war in Ukraine is, let's say, more conventional war with less war crimes involved, although there were war crimes, but not at that high scale, definitely like the war in Gaza, because my previous episode on my channel was actually I don't know if you watch it, but it was my open letter to Piers Morgan.
I see some, yeah, I see
Yeah,
somewhere. Mm-hmm.
where I actually just to avoid being biased or being accused of bias, I played with artificial intelligence, and I asked questions without saying any toponyms, but describing
Mm-hmm.
situations and how artificial intelligence would interpret international legal norms about war in Gaza. Although I know myself quite well all those things, and I can tell you, I was impressed with artificial intelligence. It's highly
Okay.
advanced and well informed. But nevertheless, I would highly recommend people to watch that episode. It's very controversial, and I hope very interesting to hear about that. But yeah, the level of war crimes, it's way too high in Gaza and even in West Bank, which is supposed to be more calm and quiet, but it's not. So I understood you have been also warrior. You have military background. Can you tell something to our audience about your uh, war wartime? Uh,
I was in war. I was in Northern Ireland for 2 years, 88. I joined the military in 88. I was in Northern Ireland, 89. I think we left 2001. Sorry, 91.
90.
So I was there for, I done 22 months, was in Omagh, which is in the west of Northern Ireland. So most of the time was spent in fields looking at cows and walking around country roads.
Uh-huh.
Most of it was very, very boring.
Well, my war was, how can I say, unfortunately more exciting and interesting, more dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, And this is one of the reasons why I started this Peacemaker YouTube channel, because I'm a war veteran who is sick of war, sick of civilian suffering, and those uh, attempts to justify pure war crimes with war crimes of another side,
Mm-hmm.
and both sides they claim their hands are clean and others are, dirty. So
Mm-hmm.
my goal is actually to try to find out with interesting guests like you and others You are actually third Brit
Okay.
in my shows. So, uh, well, I'm trying to figure out how we can achieve some, let's say, fair peace for all sides involved, because whoever was fighting doesn't like to go back and fight again. But I can see and I can feel that gradually the world is going to World War III. Do you think we are?
I don't think so. I think the problems at the moment is diplomacy is dead.
Yes.
And whereas how many years ago it seemed that war was the last option, these days it's become the first option.
Yeah,
And
unfortunately.
I think a lot of the problems that's happening in the world today could be solved if there was, how can we say, decent diplomats. But there's not. Instead of people going in and looking at both sides of the story and saying, okay, how can we rectify this? They're just pushing their government's agendas, and they've got no room for bargain. They've got no room for negotiation. It's our way or no way, which it's a schoolyard bully mentality. And I think this is where a lot of the schoolyard bullies are beginning to get slapped. And I think you see what's happening. Well, Afghanistan, the way NATO had to leave Afghanistan, they were kicked out of Afghanistan. I think within the next 6 months, there's going to be a disaster for the West in Ukraine. There's going to be issues there. And at the moment, how the Middle East is developing, I think that is spiraling out of control very, very quickly.
Mhm.
So who knows?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So I would recommend now to take, let's say, 5 minutes break, and then we will speak about some other topics which are
Sure,
uh,
sure.
which are more which are closer to your real expertise, so
All right.
you
Sure,
can tell
sure.
us something interesting about that. So see you
Okay, mate.
in a few
In
minutes.
5.
Okay, welcome back to Peacemaker by Adnan Habul. Uh, I have a very interesting conversation with Andy Wilson. So, I would like to ask you, with your extensive experience in dealing with the international law enforcement agencies and navigating complexities of organized crime, well, what do you think? What are the key challenges that uh, affect global security? Is it terrorism, piracy, whatever?
I think it's a little bit of, I think these days you're looking, organized crime has been there, it will always be there. But organized crime is getting more sophisticated. Terrorism, I think, is something people don't want to pay attention to because it's a problem they can't deal with. And I think a lot of law enforcement agencies have very much got their heads stuck in the sand. Um, One of the big issues with law enforcement internationally is cooperation between law enforcement because a lot of people don't want to talk to each other. When coming in from the private world, and if something comes up on our radar and we have to report it to law enforcement, chances are they're not going to take us seriously. I can name numerous things that's popped up, and I'm sure it's the same with you with the human trafficking. You can have a solid case, but if you put it on somebody's desk, nobody's interested. one of the big issues, and I've got one case that comes to mind where somebody in some country, somebody in Europe instigated the murder of somebody in another country via social media. Um, and we've got the evidence on that. Nobody's interested. How are they going to do the investigation? Because they can't go to that country and do the investigation. The person that's instigated the murder is somewhere in Europe. If we try to approach law enforcement in that country, they're not interested. So this is where I think law enforcement is very much kept busy with what they've got to do already. In a lot of countries these days, it's policing social media, where they don't have the resources to deal with international crimes because it's too complex. It's the same with you look at a lot of the financial crimes. Okay, if money is being scammed out of somebody and taken back to Nigeria, what can law enforcement in UK do about it? They don't have the resources. And again, even if they do know the person, we'll put it this way: I reported a Nigerian scammer to law enforcement in the US. They didn't do anything about it. They couldn't. They're not interested. I ended up having the guy on the payment plan because when law enforcement couldn't do anything, we reported. In the end, I knew he was okay. You can talk to us or else we'll talk to law enforcement again. And they ended up paying back the money. But this is where you can put the documents on people's desk and it's like they're not interested because unless you're talking major money.
Uh-huh. So have you been a victim of that scam, or
No,
it
I
was
had
part
people
of your
approach me about
job?
that, clients.
Uh-huh.
And that one client, we were lucky because we actually managed to get the guys, they had money, they stupidly had money sent to the US. So we was able to get the person's name. And once we got the name, we just waited for him to appear and then, hello, we got you.
Yeah, they
But
have
again,
in United States they have the so-called mules, which transfer money.
yeah, they think, and this is where a lot of the people doing it are unaware that they're actually what they're doing. They're doing a favor for somebody. But this is where a lot of people are a lot more happier. If you tell somebody to wire money to Nigeria, they're not going to do it. It's suspicious. So to wire money to somebody in oh yeah, no worries, it's in America or somewhere in Europe. And then generally it's people set up fake identities, etc., get fake passports and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's very, very complicated. And that person was lucky. We managed to get the money back for them. That's one out of a few hundred.
Speaking about investigations, and your profile showcase many skills from close protection to firearms handling and instructions. Uh, how these skills intersect in your day-to-day work? And can you share some more specific scenarios where integrating those skills was crucial in achieving a successful outcome? I mean, uh, don't get me wrong. YouTube is full of those self-defense courses, trainings. But from my experience, I know,
Mm.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You would be severely beaten up if you even try to apply something like that. So, can you tell me something about that?
One thing we teach again to people, especially with the close protection world, everybody's into the use of force, the guns, the self-defense, etc. That's the sexy side of the business. But the main thing we put an emphasis on is avoiding the problem. Firearms training, people like it. I was in America for 18 years. So there you have concealed carry. So people need firearms training. And the standard of most people with firearms in the US is pretty low. So people need training. As far as the close protection world is concerned, most close protection jobs are unarmed, which people don't seem to realize, especially if you're traveling internationally. So you can't travel with firearms. You're not going to get the permits. Um, some places I have worked armed, but again, it's complicated. It can be very complicated. And what people don't realize, if you do use force in a foreign country, you're going to have big problems. So you have to make sure you understand the laws and make sure everything you're doing is 150% legal. Investigations tie in with close protection greatly, because even down to, and I tell people, if you're checking out clients, you need to do your research on the clients. If you're going to locations, you need to be able to do your research on the locations. And again, if you're providing serious security to a client, you're not just providing the physical security, you're also providing the risk management. You can be helping them with their business, doing the due diligence for them on their clients, etc., etc., etc. So to me, the investigation skills and the close protection skills overlap greatly. They are the same. And again, even with a lot of investigations, you have to be aware of your personal security, because, as you said, with the people trafficking, you're going to be upsetting people.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you mentioned you also provide consulting services for businesses. So, what's your, let's say, key message or advice in general to businessmen, business persons, how to protect their business concerning intelligence breach, cyber attacks, stuff like that?
Cyber is a completely different realm these days. My simple advice to people is don't talk to strangers. And a lot of people talk to strangers online or whatever, and they end up getting entrapped, etc.
Mhm.
Um, I think everybody should be aware of the basics of personal security, which is usually counter surveillance. Make sure you're not being watched. Make sure you're not being followed, etc. For business people, the main problems either people come to me with could generally have been avoided with basic due diligence. If they checked out the people they were dealing with, if they checked out who they were giving money to, if they checked out who they were investing with, then they wouldn't end up getting scammed and ripped off. That's a big problem these days. So a lot of it is basic security awareness, which can be taught to anybody, and also then combined with proper due diligence and not believing everything you're told and not speaking to strangers.
Mhm. Well, shortly before we started our conversation, I had uh, situation with my parrot. You know, that actually, gives a kind of introduction into something that we in Europe imagine, you know, pirates with the parrot on the shoulder, and
Mm-hmm.
but from your profile, I could see that you were dealing with fighting piracy. So that's quite interesting topic.
These days, back in the day, I'd done some work for yachts, mainly the mega yachts, the luxury yachts. Maritime security is something which people are interested in. It's something, how can I put it? We don't deal with security guards on ships, but it's something which we have to keep an eye on for our club, well, for some of the people I'm dealing with. The issue of maritime piracy, I think, and maritime security is something which is going to be, well, it died off when things got under control in Somalia. But I think you've seen recently with the Houthis shutting down the Red Sea, I think piracy and maritime security is going to be a hot topic in the very, very near future, for the very near future.
Yeah,
I think the Houthi people have underestimated the Houthis greatly.
but would you call Houthis maritime militant actions as a piracy or maritime terrorism?
I It depends. Well, this is back down to terrorism. It depends on which side you're on, right?
Well, I'm on
So
nobody's side.
this is where
I'm
it's
on my side.
so this is where it's they're causing, let's put it this way, maritime security issues. They've hijacked a couple of ships, or they've taken a couple of ships. I think they had two missile strikes on ships today. Well, they fired missiles at two ships today. And I think they're in a position to cause a lot of problems for the international community. A lot of problems. I think I think it's like, I think BP said today they're not going to be sending ships through the Red Sea. So that's going to be causing problems. I think there's like 6 major shipping companies now said no more going through the Red Sea until everything's rectified. I think the major issue with this, if we're talking international politics, is making the international community, especially the United States, look bad. Because okay, what are you doing to protect the international shipping community? Why is this going on?
Mhm.
How is this happening now in these days? How has a major shipping route just been shut down?
Well, uh, as I can read and hear, Houthis were targeting ships which they believe are linked with Israel, and
Yeah.
therefore I asked you that question. But let's go back to Truth Only has a few friends. I found also few other articles that you have written. They are quite interesting. I would recommend everybody to read. One is Killing with Kindness, How Professional Criminals Operate. That's very interesting.
Well, this is where a lot of people think if the criminals are going to target you, that they're going to come. That if the professional criminals are going to target you, they're going to come in nasty. They're going to come in aggressively. Whereas a lot of times they're going to come in nicely. It's the same as they say, the famous saying out of Latin America now is silver or lead. You take our money or you take our lead.
Mhm.
And that's how a lot of people operate. They're going to come in very, very nicely to start with. And then if people are not complying, then they'll get aggressive. But there's that many ways to target people these days. Even if we go back to Ukraine, there's been multiple cases of people dying from poisoning in Ukraine. Poisons are very easy to get hold of, and they're very easy to administer. So
Mhm.
a lot of criminals, if they're professional, they will be using poisons. The same as governments. The famous one going back how many years is I think the Bulgarians killed some guy in London with a poisoned umbrella, fired a pellet into the guy's leg that had ricin in it, or some type of ricin. But there's that many different poisons out there these days. They're easy to administer, and they are a choice for criminals. It's not just somebody turning up and shooting somebody or hitting with a baseball bat.
Well, it goes from honey traps to plutonium pills, something like that,
Yeah,
right?
it's the honey traps is big. I just posted something recently. There was some American guy disappeared and ended up murdered in Colombia.
Mhm.
He went down there and he's having pictures taken with some beautiful women, and the next minute he disappears. The end, it turns up dead. It's something, especially business people, need to be aware of, and it's nothing new. It's been around forever. The honey traps are a major threat these days, and most guys being stupid will fall for them all the time.
Mhm.
And this also comes into your cybersecurity. How many people are approached online by a woman, and again, guys especially, they're approached by somebody and they'll start talking, they'll start chatting. So they think they're going to get laid or whatever. And the next minute they're caught up in a load of problems, a lot of problems. And
Yeah,
again, it's something people keep falling for all the time.
yeah, basically they find they actually talk to the victim, trying to find some backdoor, some weak spot where they can target and enter, and then manipulate with the victim. Yeah.
Some of the There's how many cases some of these honey traps go on for years. And people actually think they're in relationships, especially when you're talking the upper echelon where people are targeting politicians or government personnel. They can think they're in relationship with these people. The Chinese are big on honey traps. The Russians used to be big on honey traps.
Mm.
So this is where people have to be. If you're in that position, you have to be extremely careful. The only people that don't have to be careful are the people with nothing to lose. That's it.
Yeah. But they are usually not victims. They are not targeted.
Exactly. So
Because
again,
the,
if you got anything to lose, be careful. Very, very careful. And
yeah,
the trouble is, a lot of guys, they don't think with their brain a lot of the time, right?
yeah. Uh, well, when you mentioned those actions in your country where certain uh, members of intelligence community have been assassinated, that reminded me on another but very, very linked topic. It's about Wagner Group. Uh, you know that they have been very active in Ukraine, starting from annexation of Crimea back in
Mm-hmm.
2014. They were called as a little green men because they didn't wear
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
any insignia. And I was in Ukraine with one of your colleagues from former SAS, uh, but now retired, very good friend of mine. And he was telling me about his encounters with those Wagner Group members, and he said they are tough guys, and they are not all Russians, but you know it's kind of international professional group. And they are now, although Prigozhin was, let's say, uh, he left this,
Had an accident.
yeah, he left the earth. uh, But Wagner Group is still active in Africa. Do you know anything about their activities in Africa?
They're still active again. They're active again in Ukraine. They're with the Chechens. The
Yeah.
Chechens are working with Wagner. So Wagner, I think they're mainly in Central Africa. But again, they're in Libya. They had big problems in Mozambique. They got literally chopped up in Mozambique.
Mhm.
That's something they tried and failed. But
Mhm.
yeah, again, the Wagner concept works. And I think Prigozhin was a very, how can I put it, a very interesting character. And what he put together, it worked. It solved problems. They took a lot of casualties. They do take a lot of casualties, but they solved the problem. And I think the concept of private military companies is something, can I put it, they provide better quality to the clients than the clients bringing in foreign governments to try and assist them. And this has been seen in, well, you look at Central African Republic, I think they've asked all the United Nations and the foreign troops to leave because they weren't providing the services that they should have been provided. They're more interested in, I think, gender issues and actually fighting terrorism. Whereas even if you go back to executive outcomes, executive outcomes solved problems. Wagner solves problems. Rather than we go back to foreign government training teams that are there to try and influence the government, the local government, the way their governments want things influenced, and the outcome to be what their government wants rather than what the host government wants. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of the Wagner type operations. But again, I Wagner really is, well, they are an arm of the Russian military. And people are talking now the next big thing is going to be the Chinese private military companies.
Mhm.
And I think that's something we can expect to see within the near future.
Mhm. Very interesting. But I was actually, I don't know if you had the opportunity to read one of my articles a long time ago while everybody were asking themselves why that Bakhmut is so important. It's irrelevant. But during my service in Ukraine uh, with OSCE, actually, I have been in Bakhmut many, many times, and I
Mhm.
perfectly understood even not only tactical but also strategic importance of that town. It was roughly 70 to 80,000 population, but it's a crossroad of highways,
Mhm.
and you can easily approach to some key cities in Donetsk region, like Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, and
Mhm.
above Kupiansk in Kharkov area. But uh, that's why, I was also kind of studying how Bakhmut was taken by Wagner. Actually, you know that Prigozhin went to the prisons and he actually conscripted, hired a lot of prisoners, and they were cannon fodder.
Mhm.
And when they would, exhaust Ukrainian armed forces, then real Wagner groups were pushing forward.
Yeah.
So it was, smart, but yeah, very cruel tactics.
It's war.
Yeah,
But this is what armies have done throughout the centuries.
yeah, yeah,
It's I know when I think I've written somewhere when I was in the military, going back how many years? Well, there's a few guys with us. They were given the option, okay, if you don't want to go to jail, join the army.
yeah,
And it's people generally for not in those days it wasn't drugs. If they had pets, small assault charges and that type of thing, okay, join the military. But how many militaries have recruited from criminals throughout the years? A lot.
yeah,
And they always say the thing is with criminals, it's okay, they're willing to take risks. So that's half of the battle between finding good soldiers. The,
yeah,
the,
but
the issue is controlling them.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. Actually, military can make out of criminal, that military system can make them very, let's say, valuable citizens if they have very good commanders. But
Yeah.
uh, but with your expertise in and with the military background. I would like to ask you one very interesting question. These days it's a lot of fuss about, rightly, about killing of three hostages by IDF, Israeli Defense Force. This actually reveals to me, as a military, war veteran, that reveals actually very either poor training or evil command.
I
So,
think it's down to very, very poor training. I think, from my perspective, um, back in the day, if we go back how many years? Quite a few years, the Israeli military were pretty good. Their intelligence services were very good. They done some very cutting edge operations.
yeah,
And I remember I was years ago, I was going to do a course in Israel, but I was still in the British Army, and they wouldn't give me time off, a few extra days to go and do the course because somebody I knew said, okay, go train with the Israelis. At that time, they were top. I think what you can see if we're talking, and it's just, we can't just talk about that one incident. If we're looking at the issue with Gaza, Gaza was a complete and utter failure in intelligence.
mhm,
And what's happening now with Israel. They're trying to solve a problem that, from a military, well, put it this way, how could, I talked about this with people all the time, how could Hamas accumulate all the weaponry they have, all the logistics they have, build all the tunnels they have, if Israelis had any intelligence gathering operations within Gaza? So we're led to believe the Israeli intelligence is the best of the best. Well, their operations in Gaza was either completely incompetent or completely corrupted. So now, if we talk about the war in Gaza, how could Israel not have a plan to deal with a potential war in Gaza other than just carpet bombing?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they had no plan. What we're seeing is they had no plan. They had. I've read up on this, and everybody knew, from what I understand, people knew there was tunnels in Gaza. So you would think if you got this large threat right next to you, you're going to have a plan to deal with it. Why didn't the Israelis know where all the commanders are, where all the main people are, and if there is an issue, you go in and strategically take out the threats? I know for a fact when I was in Northern Ireland, I was infantry, etc. We're low down on the scale, but I know for a fact the Brits knew every terrorist, and chances are they knew where they were all the time. So why didn't Israel, with all its high tech, well, they're supposed to be the best of the best, so what went wrong?
So
And that was,
I want to surprise you. Actually, I made a video. It's on my channel, exactly tackling that issue. I really doubt that probably the best intelligence service in the world could make that kind of failure. So I think it was very deliberate because uh, let's put it this way: as a politician, you need good excuse to launch massive
sure.
campaign which would turn whole world on your side because you are a victim. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of chess game where you sacrifice a pawn, but you get the queen. You know?
Yeah, but it
So
didn't work, did
uh, look, I haven't been to Gaza, but
it? Mm.
and millions of experts in the world haven't been in Gaza, but they knew about tunnels. So can you imagine the level of information which Mossad had? You know, because they are even now infiltrated in Hamas and all other terrorist groups.
Are they? And are they? Again, this is back down to, I hear a lot of this, and you see on TikTok, you
Mhm.
see on social media how good these people are, etc. Best of the best. But that one incident you mentioned, where, okay, why have you just shot three of your own people that were walking towards you with a white flag, right? Imagine now, imagine Wagner troops shot three of their own hostages, well, shot three hostages or three of their own people that were walking to them with white flags. What would happen to those guys?
Yeah,
They're
actually,
gone.
uh,
Uh,
actually,
this,
that
this,
that says much about commanding level, because
the official numbers the Israelis put out the other day, and everybody's saying they're complete and utter lies,
um,
is 100 Israelis were killed, 105 or something. 20, yeah, we're talking a lot more.
yeah,
But they even mentioned 20% were due to accidents and friendly fire. That's high.
yeah,
How many of, again, even if you look to what happened when, I think, what, October 7th, it's now coming out that a lot of the Israelis that were killed by friendly fire.
Yeah,
Somebody come out and said
it's
it was
definitely
that
lack of solid training, but also if
discipline.
politicians openly say, to kill Amalek, and stuff like that, they have very inflammatory statements, and they actually unleashed from any soldier of any responsibility for war crimes, and they can
Yeah.
do everything. So white flag means nothing, and it should mean,
Mhm.
because there is Geneva Convention, which clearly says if somebody uh, surrenders, should be protected by the force which capture.
Mhm.
You know, it's simple, but obviously, commanding level said just kill everybody, whoever you see. Just
Mhm.
this is
There was two
what is my
Christians.
impression.
I think the Catholic Diocese of Jerusalem put out a complaint today because I think yesterday or the day before, a Catholic girl and a Catholic woman was shot outside of one of their hospitals or outside of a church for no reason. They were shot. They weren't hit by collateral. They weren't collateral damage to a bombing. They were shot. Why? But
Yeah.
again, I think now with this, yes, they might have thought they had some sympathy to start with. That sympathy is disappearing. I think Trump come out and said they need better PR because it's pretty clear. I think people are beginning to see the hypocrisy between what's happening. You mentioned those three hostages that were shot, and there's been other hostages shot. You mentioned those three. Imagine now the Russians done that to three of their own people. The media would have ripped that apart.
Yes.
The media
Yes.
said very little about this, if anything. And I was going to bring this up if you didn't mention it. So again, it's like, okay, you see the hypocrisy, not just in the politics, but also the hypocrisy in the media.
Yeah.
And
Double
I think
standards.
it's huge double standards. And
Yeah.
I think if nothing else, this has taken the West's moral high ground. They can no longer say, okay, human rights this, human rights that. Okay, you're ignoring human rights in Gaza. Yes, Gaza should have been, and I was talking to somebody about this just before I got online with you. Um, it should have been a counterinsurgency operation. Okay, take a deep breath, take a step back, and go after the bad guys.
Yes.
That's war. Not just go in and completely destroy the place.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully
And
agree with you.
it's
It could be done in more precise and more effective way than it is done these days,
I
which
would say the
actually
reason.
which
Hmm?
actually gives space for doubts. Is it a real goal to get rid of Hamas, or to get
They're
rid of
not going to get rid of
population,
Hamas.
or population?
They're not going to get rid of Hamas. Yes, you can say it's ethnic cleansing, but again, they're not. This battle is going to go on a lot longer,
Yeah,
and it's causing more and more problems. Look at the Houthis.
yeah,
This can spread, and again, this can end up causing, especially the US. The US losing a lot to face. And I've said this again. I talk about this quite a bit with people. It's only going to take, and this is where the big vulnerability I see for the United States is their Navy. And even when the Navy was in the Persian Gulf, let's use the Iranians as an example. The Iranians have a lot of fast boats, a lot. They have a lot of missiles. We go back, well, how many times they've been instigating with Iran? It only takes Iran or one of the Houthis, let's use the Houthis as an example, for them to strike a US boat, to strike a US ship, the US has lost face. What are they going to do? Are they going to invade Yemen?
yeah.
Well, again, how much more manpower? It's an election year coming up. Does the US want to get involved in another war? After there's going to be problems in Ukraine, Israel's kicking off. Does the West really want to get involved in another war in the Middle East over a problem that's not their problem?
Let's
But
hope
again, it comes
there
down.
will be no more wars. I mean, no new wars or reviving old wars, cold wars, you know, frozen
Yeah, but
wars.
who would have thought that now? And again, who would have thought 5 years ago we would have the issues in Ukraine? It's gone back to the Cold War. We've just gone back 30 years.
Yeah.
The Cold War was well and truly over. Everybody should be doing business. And now we're back to the Cold War with Ukraine, Russia phobia, etc. Who would have thought there would have been the problems there are now in the Middle East, in Gaza?
Mhm.
No, again, this to me, this comes down to, and again, people will hate me for saying this, would we have these problems now if Trump was in power? I'd say no. You wouldn't have the issues in Ukraine to start with because you need strong leadership. There is no strong leadership in the West.
Mhm.
And I think people are beginning to see that and they're taking advantage of it.
So let's see what will happen next year in the elections, after the elections in United States. Maybe you are
I think
right.
it's I think
May-
it's going to be problematic in the United States. We're back down to, I think, a lack of people, one, a lack of diplomacy, and it's gone from where we can agree to disagree. We can still be friends. We just have different viewpoints. And again, these days people can't do that. You have to believe in this or you have to believe in that. There's no middle ground. And if you believe in this, I don't like you because you believe in something I don't like. I say to people, okay, we can go into an ice cream shop. You like chocolate ice cream? I like vanilla ice cream. We're not going to get into a fight about it.
Yeah.
But really, that's the level we've got because weak leadership, kindergarten diplomacy. So that's leading to, I would say, the vast majority of the problems we've got today. And again, anybody that's, how can I put it? War's not good for anybody unless you're selling the bullets. That's it.
Okay, I think uh, your words are very good conclusion of this conversation. I hope we will meet again, and I wish you good luck and all success. And I will have to finish this episode because we run out of time. Thank you very much once again.
Pleasure.
And for everybody else, goodbye.